Hey guys, Born Now back with you. On this video I will be talking about Better Call Saul Season 6 Episode 8. It is called Point and Shoot. Full spoilers from the start of this review, and this is the big return for Better Call Saul after 6 weeks out, back for the final part of Season 6 and the final 6 episodes I think it is overall of the show, so the big finale. But what a massive episode to come back on. And I'll just say, you might have noticed I didn't get around to doing episode 7. So at the midway point of volume 1 or of the season. I'm sorry about that. I originally did record a review, but it ended up not taking, and the computer had issues. And yeah, in the end I didn't get a chance to put episode 7 review out, so I'm sorry about that, because it was obviously a dramatic episode itself, and especially the end of the episode. But just to say a few things about it, it was an absolutely brilliant episode which paid off the Hammond plot stuff so well with Kim and Saul, where we saw what their plan actually was. They'd slowly been building it up the last few weeks, and the way it all played out in the episode was very sort of entertaining to watch. But then of course you had the tragic conclusion for the episode and for Hamlin, which is something I personally didn't see coming. But you just had this great suspense of hearing that Naro was sort of on his way and when will he show up. But it was just so well handled in the way the show handled these things. Then Hamlin shows up at a point where you sort of expect it to be Lalo, and he comes rushing in. He's given Saul and Kim both barrels, and they're now no-selling it. Of course, they're not going to admit to what they've done, but that it's at the point where Hamlin's getting fired up. Then you get that brilliant bit of direction, the light flickering in the background, and Lalo just appears in the background like a ghost, and it's, oh my god. Because what's so great about the drama of that scene and Hamlin's reaction when Lalo comes in and you know, confronts them. First of all, obviously Kim and Saul's like look of fear in general, and the way they're trying to get Howard out of there, because they know who this is, and they know that Howard's in over his head and needs to get out there. But it's just the sense of you watching that scene at home and knowing Howard's a sitting duck if he doesn't get out of there. And then because he just treats it as Lalo's just like a client, and he starts mocking Kim and Saul more, and you really need to get better legal advice, this sort of thing. And you just know he's digging himself a grave without knowing it, and that he's going to end up dead. So that's ultimately such a tragic scene, because Howard, no matter what you think of him, even if you think then, you know, Kim and Saul are justified in what they did to him, which is debatable, you certainly wouldn't have thought then he deserves that, because the Lalo thing has nothing to do with him. He just got caught in the crosshairs, and it's just such a tragic way for Howard to go out. It's obviously a brilliantly fitting way to end up that whole scenario, and what it does to Kim and Saul, that's the big thing, because it sort of does give them some humanity because of the way they react to it. And in some ways, ultimately, you may say, especially with Saul getting tied up with these guys, he really brings a lot of this stuff on himself. But the important thing is the way they sell it in the scene, and their reactions when Howard is like coldly shot dead. This episode follows the fallout from that stuff, and it's actually set over the same night. So we literally jump into the scene in the flat with Kim, Saul and Nero, and Kim and Saul just reacting to it, just, you know, really sort of panicking, and they can't get hold of themselves. As you see obviously Howard on the floor, and I have to actually mention the opening scene, which is Howard's car on a beach, all washed up and isolated on the beach. And what's so great about that scene as an opener is you you then find out how it ends up there, but the way it ends up there is not what you would expect. It's a completely different thing that bookends the episode, which again is something this show does so well. But the reactions from Sol and Kim, and just the way it snaps back to Lalo at one point, and he just takes control of the scene, and in his very cold, machine-like sort of way, coolly sort of tells them to basically shut up and focus, and just lays out the plan. He's just so machine-like when he has to be. I mean, there's a lot of bravado and charisma to the character of Lalo, but when he's in business mode, when there's a situation to take care of, he obviously has no regard for Howard. He doesn't care one jot that he got in the way. For him, it's just a piece of business he has to take care of, which definitely provides sort of, a contrast between him, Sol, and Kim. No matter all the dodgy stuff they do and some of the things they've done over the course of this show, it definitely marks a line in the sand between those two camps. But Lalo's all about business. He takes control and he lays out a plan, and he holds them to ransom is what he does, because he insists then Sol has to go to this random address, and that when the person opens the door, he has to shoot him. And he's holding Kim to ransom. He says, you've got an hour. If you don't return, he doesn't say in so many words, but he implies that Kim will be killed. So this is the first step to this brilliant plan, and the two halves of it, and the double sort of turn of it. Because first of all, Sol appears to talk Lalo around and appears to convince him to let him go instead of Kim. So, first point to make is I like how Sol goes into Sol mode, but in a very different way. I mean, this is a thing he's doing because he's worried about the woman he loves. He's trying to get Kim out of the house so that he's sort of maybe assuming that she can do a runner, she can disappear and she'll be safe, but it's just a way to get her out of the apartment to try and save her. It's almost like Sol's willing to take the bullet for Kim if it comes down to that. But Lalo obviously goes for it, and on paper it looks like Sol has used his Sol-type tactics. Now, it doesn't just happen because there's plenty of resistance from Kim, but obviously when Lalo's made up his mind, and there's not a lot they can do. But it's a good bluff in the scene, because it appears as though Sol has sort of used his talking skills to convince Lalo, which might have been a bit too convenient, but of course it doesn't work out that way. Of course, Lalo has something up his sleeve. It's almost like he planned for Sol to do this, and it's all part of his major plan that night. So Kim goes off, and once again, great acting from Rhea Seaborn. Her in the car driving over to the house, she stops at one point randomly. It's like a traffic light, and she looks over at this car which has a couple of police guys in it, and it's just one of those silent scenes where you don't need any dialogue. You just know what's going on. You know from the way she looks over, her sort of eyes of fear, but also just the context. You know that she's considering telling the cops in the car, but of course doesn't, because she figures it may not work out the best for Jimmy. But she has that moment where she considers that. So it's a nice little touch. And this is where the direction of the episode is so on point, and the mood, and it builds with some of the music, where it sort of shows you that a lot of times Better Call Saul, because we're used to it being a very comedic show, a very satirical type show, and obviously great big moments of drama with the characters, but it sort of has a certain style and the way it plays out. But for a lot of this episode, it was a pure sort of thriller, very tense, almost like a horror movie at times. like these scenes as Kim's just driving along the highway, it's a certain sort of style with the lights and the darkness, and it feels like a full-on horror movie at times, but the way they use like the sound and the sort of electronic sort of type industrial type score, it sort of moves at a fair pace this episode, I'll say that, but it's a very we mean business style episode, and it's extremely suspenseful and tense with so much stakes. I mean, the fact that she only has an hour to do this, or Saul could get killed by Lalo, that has great stakes in itself. We see back at the apartment that Lalo is once again playing with Saul, and he puts the volume up. They've still got like the film noir in the background. Again, that's a really nice choice. Then it's a film noir playing, but he puts the volume up and he leaves the room for a while. So it's obvious that he's got a plan, then he's ready to hatch the next part of his plan, and he leaves Saul there. And I do like that as soon as he leaves, Saul starts to struggle, tries to escape, and he just falls, like the chair falls, but he's still tied to it. It works so well that Lalo does the not tight enough, then he pretty much knows Saul can't escape, but it works so perfectly that Saul tries. But Kim goes over to the house, and it's revealed soon that it's Gus's house, or the house he's been using as a base, the house that we've seen in earlier episodes. So that works really well. Then Lalo has sent Kim to kill Gus, but not really, and that's the brilliance of his plan in this episode, because he gives her a vague description of this guy who sort of does fit like Gus's description. So she goes to the door, and then you see Mike appear in the background suddenly, and it's another really smooth bit of direction where he just grabs her quickly, takes her into the house, and takes her like down to the basement, and you've got the regular crew there, and we see Gus watching on like a monitor. So it's then revealed, but what one of the good touches is that there's actually one of the crew looks like Gus but isn't Gus, so it's almost like Lalo has purposely, it's a misdirection almost, because it's like there is this guy who looks like Gus, who in the scene where Kim's being questioned by Mike, she looks at this guy and actually thinks it's Gus. So it's just one of those funny little beats, and I guess from Lalo's point of view, it's like if she did kill Gus, then it's a bonus. You know, Gus has been taken out, but if she didn't, it doesn't matter, because he's ultimately using it as a distraction, and he's sort of counting on Gus showing up at the laundry mat, the laundry drop, the base for the drugs. So that's where we're going to lead. Then it was all part of this plan. Mike questions Kim, and once again, this is a brilliant scene just for Sheborn to show how frantic Kim is, how scared she is and desperate. She tells Mike the whole thing, and Mike once again just takes control. He is just so ice cold and cool, and he just knows what's to do. And once again, one of the great things about Mike as a character, which I think puts him on the good side of things, is that he knows how to be a human being, but he knows how to do it in an efficient sort of way. I mean, obviously his job comes first, and that's clear in this episode. He has like his loyalty to Gus, but he's obviously not an arsehole about it the way like Lalo is. He's very like sweet and in his own way sort of tender with Kim, but he assures her. I mean, this again goes back to it being almost very business-like. He just assures her, don't worry, we'll take care of it. And he says, we'll take care of it in 20 minutes. So he puts a time limit on it. And I think it's Kim that mentions the 20 minutes, actually. She's like, you've got 20 minutes, otherwise he's going to kill Jimmy. And once again, stakes, it reminds you of the amount of time they've got left to save Jimmy. But of course, that's not part of the plan. You see Gus watching on the monitors, and Mike and his team go over to the apartments, and they save Jimmy. Not that he needed saving, that's part of the plan, but Mike just... I love how business-like he is with Jimmy. He's like, you've got like... he says something about don't make any noise, I'm going to take the gag off. And that actually was a nice touch in the scene with Kim, how mad Kim is with Mike and co. Because Mike, in a previous episode, said they were watching them, they had their back, not to worry. And that, of course, didn't come to pass. Mike must feel terrible about that. It's sort of telling that he doesn't really respond. But, yeah, he probably does feel bad about that because he gave Kim his word, and he is sort of a man of honour, and obviously it just like slipped through the cracks. So, but it's soon revealed that this is all part of Lalo's plan. I like how it cuts between scenes here where we see Gus very business-like getting ready. Once again, it's just this great character beat for Gus where he's just getting his smart suit on, and he talks to Kim, but he talks to her over like the radio. He doesn't actually go down in person. He's taking no chance, and he sets up this plan. Once he hears that it's Lalo, he almost knows what's happening. But it's this brilliant double turn where he goes with his guys, a couple of guys, to the chicken place, the laundry place, I should say. And they go in, and he's looking around, and the other two are kind of like, well, what are you looking for, boss? And you think it's just as basic as he's just checking for Lalo, but also that maybe he's worried for his business. Lalo shows up out of nowhere, kills his guys, and holds him up, and what's great about this scene is you think Lalo's in control the whole time. Now, Gus sort of does have his ice cold demeanour, so it's almost like he's not being like terrified or scared, but I mean that's very much Gus. But you believe that Lalo has control of this scene. He starts filming him on the camera, which is almost for the purposes of, first of all, just playing with him and humiliating him, but also I think he intends it to like as a thing to go back to his uncle, maybe, to Hector. But anyway, you get this whole thing where he's filming him on camera, his last moments, and it's quickly revealed that Lalo's whole plan was to create a distraction to get Mike's guys to go over to Saul so that Gus would be vulnerable. And it's almost like he sort of cottoned on Gus going over to the laundry place. And so his whole plan is to kill Gus there and to take over the laundry place, to take over this base, this business, and use it for their own purposes. Now, obviously, it's one of these fascinating scenes where because Gus survives, because Gus is in Better Call Saul, he has to survive. But you're just wondering how he's going to get out of this. And in the back of my mind, I'm naturally jumping to like, is Mike going to show up? Is someone's going to... But that in itself would be too simple. So they find a much more satisfying way to play that out. And once again, the scene is very intense. So you have this back and forth where Lalo sort of makes it clear that he's about to kill Gus, but Gus says, you won't do it just yet. And Lalo, with his like cold, sinister smiles, is like, oh, okay, why is that? And Gus is like, because I need to, tell Hector what I think of him or whoever. And it's like, okay, go ahead, you've got 1 minute. And he's still filming. And Gus does this whole defiant sort of speech where he's basically tearing Hector down and the other side of the Ceramental sort of clan. And he's just talking about blood money and calling them gutless and all the rest of it. And it's just an amazing scene because Lalo's just watching this, soaking it all in, and he's ready to kill Gus any moment. But then Gus, there's like some sort of a bomb in like on his body, or just some sort of a sparkler which turns things off, turns the lights off, and it's just like a distraction which sort of allows him to like run away into like a corner somewhere as Lalo tries to shoot him. And you just get this really great, it's almost like a movie moment where they're just these two in the dark because it's completely pitch black now, and he shoots like into the dark, but it's just that element of surprise which allowed him to get the best of Lalo, and the fact this was a calculated thing. And there's suspense because you can't really see if he shot Lalo or if Lalo's got him. Lalo does get a shot on him. In fact, that's earlier in the scene. He just gets a warning shot. And it's another nice little touch of the scene, actually, then Lalo knows that Gus would have a bulletproof vest and he would just prepare and be ready for any eventuality. But still, there's a shot into the vest which is still going to hurt him. And he just says, because at one point he says it can't protect your head. That's one thing a bulletproof vest can't do. But we see this plan, and it turns out that Lalo has been shot. Gus has shot him in the dark and shot him right in the throat, so he slowly dies. He gets one more evil sort of laugh as Gus coldly stands over him. And yeah, I mean, that's the big sort of double thing. First of all, Lalo's whole plan and the decoy plan, but then the turn, then Gus actually anticipated that, and he set the whole thing in motion. He was counting on Lalo's being drawn out to him and then laying in wait, basically. So, but that's something Mike says later, which is one of the things of the episode, is that Mike is he is mad at what Gus did and how he put everybody in jeopardy. And he just says to him later, you know this could have played out very differently, don't you? And Gus says, I suppose it could have done. But it's a really, really good Gus episode, actually. We get a lot of classic Gus type moments. And one of my favourite scenes is him calling into the chicken place, and he calls like the assistant manager, and he just makes it clear he won't be in tomorrow. And then he says he's going on like a business trip or something for a few days, so then he probably won't be in for a week. So he says he needs him to run the business, and this is just classic Gus. Him, obviously, it's important in the business, like his cover business, the chicken place is taken care of, so that there's no holes in that whole side of the plot. So he just needs to make sure the assistant manager is ready to cover him for a week. But this is him on the phone as Mike and one of his other guys are like stitching him up. So that's just classic Gus. Then he's not going to wait to be stitched up. He wants to make sure things are taken care of for the morning. That's just classic Gus. So once again, Mike and his gang have to spring into action. They have to take care of the whole Kim Soul thing, and Mike goes over and lays out the plan. He has that great line of, you're Laurence Olivier, you're Meryl Streep to Soul and Kim, and their reaction is once again effective because they don't know at this point that Lalo's dead, and they're panicking. Is he going to come back? And I sort of like that Mike doesn't confirm that he's actually dead, but he just says, believe me, he won't be coming back. And he just takes care of business and says, oh, one of the funniest scenes is you're getting a new refrigerator. And his men's like, bring it in. And he just tells them, go to work, do your thing. You know, you've got stuff on the docket. And it's just this great Better Call Saul type thing where he tells them, keep telling the lies. It's this great parallel between these two worlds, which in theory shouldn't have any connection, shouldn't cross over. And that's part of the tragedy of Howard, is that he was part of the other world and he didn't deserve what happened to him. But it's this contrast between the two worlds where it's almost for the sake of, you know, keeping things apart, for the sake of taking care of this situation, Mike is telling them, keep the lie going. You have to go to work as normal. You have to do what you keep doing. And he just has the line about just, keep the lie going. And he just tells them what to do, and he says, while you're out, we're going to take care of the apartment. We're going to fix it up and clean up the whole mess. Decide to bury the Lalo body and Howard's body in the laundry thing, in the basement. But the sort of slightly more human touch of Mike, because they sort of sling Lalo down, not really bothered too much about that, but Mike actually tells them easy, you know, warns them, don't just flop Howard in. So yeah, it's almost this thing of be a bit more respectful, because this is a guy who didn't deserve to lose his life in all this. He wasn't part of it. Now, it's sort of ironic in many ways, because they're obviously, from their point of view, they're just treating this as like a business bit of transaction, and the way they go about their business so sort of calculated. But there is just that human touch here and there where Mike is, he's aware that this guy didn't deserve this, and unfortunately, to save our own skins and everything, we have to bury him away, and it's all part of business. But he wasn't the arsehole in this. He wasn't the guy who, at least in their minds, deserved to be killed. So it's a little bit more respectful in how they deal with the Howard, like his body. You know, don't just throw it in the pit like it's nothing. But the overall plan is then that's the reveal with the car on the shore later, is that they're going to make it look like Howard like overdosed, because that's the thing with the keep telling the lies you've been telling, because they made it look like Howard was an addict. So Mike plays into that with his strategy, where he says that's going to be the story. His body's just going to wash up on the beach, his car's there as well, and it's just going to look like he overdosed, and he kind of, I mean, not intentionally offed himself, but he overdosed, he ended up in the sea. And that's just going to play up to the angle you've been playing up to, and how you've made him look like that. So that's going to be a very clean sort of thing. But the body disappears, of course. The body goes into the pit, and they cover that up, because then there's no inconsistencies. Then there's not going to be an autopsy, and they can stick to their story. I mean, obviously the authorities in theory would do some looking and search for the body, because it is not there. It's not at the beach. But obviously eventually they'll give up and just, they'll have to put it down to like a suicide or an overdose. But they've obviously dealt with the body, and chances are it will never be found, because there's no way to suspect than it would be in the laundry place. So it's a great plan. I think it sort of adds to the sadness of the thing, then, because of the nature of Howard's death and just him crossing over to this other world. And unfortunately, Mike and his crew have to sort of deal with this sort of like it is a business transaction, and this is a serious deal. So we've got to bury him and come up with this story. So there's something very sad and human about this idea that even once Howard is dead and they've dealt with Lalo, they can't just deal with Howard and treat him like a human being. There's that one touch, as I said, don't just toss him into the pit like he's nothing. But unfortunately, it's the way it has to go in many ways. Then they have to cover it up and make it look like he was an addict and just play up to Kim and Sol. And I think that's a double shot, like a hit for Kim and Sol almost, where this ultimately is the tragic nature of what they did to Howard, because first of all, the worst thing is the fact that it did sort of get him killed, but it's another little shot at them. Then they have to then run his character through the mud in death, that they can't just tell the real story, that they have to play up the angle of he was an addict and all that. So, and you can see they feel horrible. It's so well sold by the actors in the scene. And it's very interesting moving forward now, because going into this episode, I probably didn't think the Lalo stuff would be sold tied up as it is. And obviously it's an ongoing thing, because they make it clear that the Salamanca side of things, as soon as they realise Lalo's missing and hasn't been in contact, they will be on their way and they'll suspect something's up. So that's what the whole business trip is about with Gus, and he's leaving the country for a set period of time, or leaving that area anyway. And so this is obviously an ongoing thing, but it's very interesting. Now, I have no complaints. I think it was very well done. This was a great, it all happens in one night style episode, where the tension was so high, the stakes were so high, you had lots of great character drama as always. And it was a great end, because ultimately, you've got this turf war, and I think ultimately you are more on the Gus side of thing, of wanting them to beat Lalo. And so it's a satisfying ending and a great twist and a great plan. And even though it did put people in danger, it was a smart plan from Gus, which was a gamble but ultimately paid off. And it's great to see Lalo get that in effect. It's great to see him finally get some comeuppance and all the rest of it, and it's a great payoff to the whole thing. And now they have 5 episodes to plant their end game, and once again you're sort of wondering what's going to happen with Kim and Sol, especially Kim. She's obviously not in Breaking Bad. We obviously still have, which has been widely reported, we still have the Jesse and Walt cameos, which is going to be very interesting to see how the show handles that. But yeah, once again, the focus sort of turns back to Kim and what's going to happen to her, because, it's almost like they've averted this danger, but there could still be future dangers, because it's almost like if something did go wrong, they do have the pressure from the Mike side. It's like Mike and his crew will be monitoring them, but something you assume's gonna happen that brings that whole thing to a head. But it's very, very intriguing stuff for the rest of the season. So that's Better Call Saul episode 8 of season 6, Point and Shoot. Another very good episode, which really built on the mid-season break and that episode, the episode 7, which was very dramatic in itself. But because I think there's been 1 or 2 complaints this season with certain pacing or certain scenes that maybe could have been done differently or cut out. But the way they've paid this Howard stuff off and the way they've concluded the Lalo stuff, I have no complaints with that. They couldn't have done it any better, and it's all very satisfying. And as I said, with real stakes and real unpredictability, there was some great turns in this episode. So very good stuff, and I'll be continuing on and doing the final 5 episodes. So that's Better Call Saul for the week. Like and subscribe as always. Share me out on social media. make comments on what you thought of the episode, if there's anything I missed, which I'm sure there is. I know there was a whole thing about Nacho in the episode where not Gus, Lalo was questioning Saul about that stuff and how like Hector's men could have broken into his house, and that was quite an interesting scene because Lalo coming across as a bit more human, saying innocent people were killed in that whole thing. But that's another scene I sort of skimmed over a bit. Lots to talk about in this episode, but I'll be back soon with more Better Call Saul and just something else to promote on the channel. Actually, me and Rachel are doing our top 25 horror movies. It's a special list. We normally do top 10 lists, but because it's a year now since me and Rachel started recording together, and so much of what we've done has been horror movie related, we're actually doing a special where we've come up with our own individual top 25s, and that's going to be a special which should be out this week. So our top 25 horror movies. So look out for that on the channel, and look out for more Better Call Saul and TV reviews. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.